I'm thrilled to be joined today by Dustin Lanterman, the Communications Director at the Saratoga Automobile Museum. Dustin, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, sir.
You've got a fabulous facility up there. You've got all kinds of things going on. Let's start at the high level. Tell me about the museum.
So the museum originally was an idea that had come about in probably the late 90s by Carol Cooke. He was really kind of the person who had the original idea to bring an auto museum to Saratoga Springs. They chose the Saratoga Spa State Park. Of course, there were a couple of buildings that were deactivated at the time, one being the bottling plant, the other being the Roosevelt II bathhouse. So they chose the bottling plant because of its size. So it really was kind of the best option for them to have a museum. The renovation started in 2001 and were finished early 2002. And then the museum opened to the public on June 1st of 2002.
Now, you mentioned the location of the museum in the park. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of the building in the park and how you were seeing life today during the pandemic and use of the park?
Absolutely. So the building itself was the original New York State bottling plant, which bottled 4 different varieties of water, the Saratoga mineral water, Coesa, Geyser, Hawthorne, and State Seal. So those 4 were bottled here in the building from 1935 all the way up till 1970. The park itself was designed by the Saratoga Commission, which was headed up by Roosevelt at the time, President Roosevelt. He sent a team of people to Europe to study the spas of Europe because he thought this would be a perfect spot for a spa that would rival those in Europe. And everything was designed with health and wellness in mind. You know, the history of the park is health and wellness, and we've seen an increase in people focusing on their health and wellness during this pandemic. And it's been wonderful to see the amount of people in the park enjoying the natural wonders of the park, you know, taking a moment for themselves in front of the reflecting pool over in the Hall of Springs, or just, you know, sitting in the sun and just relaxing for a bit, or going for a run or a walk or walking their dogs. It's been a wonderful, wonderful thing to see.
It's a beautiful park. It's a wonderful place to have the museum set in as you come down the road with the beautiful pine trees and the museum's right there on the left. Tell me how the museum, not all museums address multiple decades of automobile history. Tell me how that's a connection for your museum, especially with the historic element of the building.
Absolutely. So for me, I went to school for U.S. history, so this is a dream come true. I've always wanted to work in a museum since I was a little kid. So this is a dream come true for me, being able to work in a place that appreciates, you know, not just automotive history, but really world history. Just to stand in a room and see the progression of what 100 years can make in automotive history. And then you begin to think about all of the things that happened within that 100 years. You know, and it's all tied together. It really is all tied together. And I don't think people really grasp that all the time, which is a shame because it's a different way to look at it. People think, oh, it's a car museum. It's just about cars. It's really a study about our history, where we've been and where we're going. And we think that, you know, a lot of people can come to here and be inspired to maybe dream bigger and do different things. And we're hoping that, you know, we see kids come into the museum and they see the Franklin or they see the Pierce Arrow or they see one of these race cars. It kind of triggers something in them, something that they've never seen before. And they think, well, if we can get from that point to where we are now, you know, what can I contribute to that story, to that timeline? So it's really quite wild to stand in a room and really say, well, this car was around at this point in history and this car was around at that point in history. It's really quite something.
It is amazing. The variety of types of cars and the time frame of cars really stood out to me during my visit. And plus, I'd like to see a couple McLarens there, and one of them has David Hobbs' name on it too, so that was fun too.
Yeah, that was cool.
Tell me, you know, I noticed you had a special ante-room exhibit about women and driving. Can you tell me about that? And that may be an expanded exhibit, I understand.
Yeah, so right now we have Wheels, Women and Independence. It covers 1900 to 1920, and it focuses on 6 pioneering women who used the automobile to further not only their own goals and lives, but to advance the suffrage movement and independence for women. So a lot of their travels all started in New York State. And it took them across the country. I mean, one of the cars that we actually have upstairs in the museum, in 1910 Maxwell car companies were built along the Hudson River in New York State. And they actively, I don't want to say use women in their advertising, but made sure that they appealed to the women because they knew that that was the direction that the world was heading. And that really helped launch the women's suffrage movement and kind of made it mobile.
It's amazing. I mean, the multiple facets of history that are featured across the museum. Dustin Lanterman of the Saratoga Automobile Museum. Dustin, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, sir. We greatly appreciate it.